house, Hartwell Tavern, stands in the town of Lincoln, about halfway between Lexington, where the first colonists were killed, and Concord, where the first British soldiers died. On the morning of April 19, 1775, not more than a month ago, the British regular troops marched along this very highway with colonial blood on their hands. I did not see fighting that day. Soon after we received news of the battle, I walked with my company of Connecticut militiamen from New Haven to Massachusetts, a journey of 6 days. We came armed and ready to fight the British regulars. But we have had little to do these past 2 weeks, except to watch and wait. Sometimes the tension grows unbearable. My name is Amos Doolittle. I am a silversmith by trade, with some small talent for drawing and engraving. And so, when this morning dawned bright and fair, and having nothing required of me at hand, I determined to put my skills to good use. I gathered my drawing materials and set off along the Bay Road, which leads from Boston to Concord, intending to sketch the scenes of fighting. I thought to make some engravings that people might better understand what happened on that day of April 19th.
You are very welcome here, Mr. Doolittle.
A toast to this enterprising young man, to Amos Doolittle, artist and American.
Thank you, good sirs. I know that since the troops arrived, you have endured difficult times.
The people of Boston have suffered most with the constant presence of British soldiers in that town.
We have felt their threat as well.
And we have felt the burden of economic oppression.
Above all, we long to be free of tyranny and to govern ourselves.
General Gage, commander of the British troops in Boston, knew of these colonial sentiments. He knew that the colonists of the towns surrounding Boston were stockpiling armaments, muskets and balls and powder and cannon, ready for a fight should it come to that. General Gage, in response to some pressure from his superiors in England, as I understand it, determined to dispatch his troops to the village of Concord to find the arms and destroy them. A well-known Bostonian, Dr. Joseph Warren, learned of the general's intentions and warned his fellow patriots to be on the alert for signs that the troops were preparing to march. On April 18th, several Bostonians observed unusual activity among the British soldiers and suspected that the moment had come. An informer confirmed Dr. Warren's suspicions.
General Gage has ordered his troops to march out to Concord tonight. They will destroy whatever arms I can find there.
To warn the countryside, Dr. Warren dispatched 2 riders. He sent William Dawes by road across Boston Neck, a risky route guarded by British soldiers, through the village of Roxbury and on to the Bay Road which leads to Concord. The second rider, Paul Revere, would go a different way across the Charles River by boat, then by horse from Charlestown, and there join the Bay Road. Fearing that he might be caught, Revere sent 2 of his fellows to Boston's North Church. There, in the steeple, they flashed the signal that the people of Charlestown had been told to watch for. 1 candle lantern meant the British troops would take the same route as Dawes, along Boston Neck, 1 if by land. But Revere's men hung 2 lanterns in the steeple that night, meaning that the British troops would take the shorter and faster route by water across the Charles River and then by foot, 2 if by sea. By all accounts, the moon hung low and shone bright that night as Revere set off.
Goodbye, Mother. I must away.
It will be danger, Paul.
Yes, British officers may be patrolling the roads.
But you'll not carry a pistol.
No, I'd best not.
Keep yourself safe, Paul.
2 friends rode Revere across the Charles River, and once in Charlestown, Revere mounted a waiting horse. Meanwhile, the British troops, under shore of the Charles and crowd aboard a fleet of small boats. It took hours for the 700 soldiers to make the crossing, wade through the muddy marshes of Cambridge, assemble in formation, and prepare to march upon it. This provided Revere with a generous advantage of time. He galloped along the highway, calling the alarm as he went.
Wake up! The regulars are coming out! Spread the alarm!
Revere's calls brought to life a great network of alarms, all manner of signals devised by the townsfolk in these parts to alert its inhabitants of British soldiers on the march. The peal of the church bell, the musket firing on the common, or the cry of a night-riding messenger.
Awake! The regulars are coming! Fire the militia! The regulars are coming out!
Throughout the countryside, townsmen and farmers, the men of our colonial militia, heard the alarm, seized their weapons, and set out to help. About midnight, Revere arrived in Lexington and stopped at the house where John Hancock and Samuel Adams were staying.
Mr. Hancock, Mr. Adams, not so much noise. You'll wake the town. You'll have noise enough before long. The regulars are coming out.
William Dawes rode into Lexington not long after Revere, and the two continued on together. Along the road, they met Samuel Prescott, a young doctor on his way home to Concord.
What brings you out tonight? The regulars are coming. To Concord? Yes, this very night. Will you help us spread the alarm? I am a son of liberty. I'm with you.
In Lincoln, not far from this tavern, Revere, Prescott, and Dawes encountered a patrol of British officers. Dawes, some paces behind the others, wheeled his horse and avoided capture. Revere turned to the right and found himself surrounded. The patrol detained Revere, only to set him free without his horse a few hours later. But Prescott, being left, eluded the soldiers and spurred his horse toward Concord to deliver the alarm.
Up! The regulars are coming!
The redcoats marched through the night. At dawn, they reached Lexington, tense and tired, and wary. There, the regulars were surprised to find some 70 colonial militiamen gathered on the village common, muskets at the ready, their wives and children huddling nearby. Just 70 colonists blocking the way of some 700 red-coated soldiers. The captain of the Lexington militia, Mr. John Parker, speaks in order.
Don't fire! Let the troops pass by.
But the redcoats do not pass by. Rather than go left and follow the road to Concord, they advance directly onto the common and toward the militia. Major Pitcairn barks a command to the colonists.
Lay down your arms! Disperse! Don't know the king's troops!
The colonists start to disperse. But suddenly, there is a musket report. The shots trigger a volley of British troops. The colonists fire a shot or two in response. But the British soldiers overwhelm them, charging forward and firing as they go. The watching families react in horror as members of the militia fall. Some dead, some wounded. The air thickens with gun smoke. Blood stains the ground. The British officers quickly restore order and reform the troops, who let out a victory cheer. fired first? Why? No one knows. But the effect was unmistakable. What had been tension had now become a bloody conflict. The regulars proceeded on toward Concord, and at about 6:30 in the morning, marched through Lincoln by this very tavern and the house next door where Mary Harper lives.
The army marched up in fine order. Their bayonets glistened in the sunlight like a field of waving grain. If it hadn't been for the purpose they came for, I should say it was the handsomest sight I ever saw.
As the column of regulars marched on toward Concord, the townspeople who had received the alarm from Dr. Prescott early that morning scrambled to hide their stores of weapons and supplies. In Concord, the militia gathered to consider the situation and determine a course of action. They agreed to march out along the ridge and meet the British regulars. When the redcoats came into view in a column nearly a quarter-mile long, the militia turned and marched boldly before the British troops with drums and fifes to play. They marched through town, over the North Bridge, and took up a position on a hill on the far side of the Concord River. It was about 7:30, I'm told, that the British regulars marched into the village. Lieutenant Colonel Smith directly ordered his troops to search the town and destroy or burn any military supplies they could find. Smith and Pitcairn climbed to a vantage point in the burying ground above the town, the better to direct and observe the action. They sent one company to secure the South Bridge, and 7 companies out to the North Bridge, some of which proceeded over the bridge to search Barrett's farm. Throughout the morning, the militiamen held their position, watching and debating what to do. All the while, new men continued to hurry in from nearby towns, and the colonial ranks swelled to some 400 men, armed and ready to fight. Suddenly, the colonists see a shiver of smoke rising above the wooden buildings in the town.
Will you let them burn the town down?
I haven't a man who's afraid to go.
They load their muskets. Their commander, Colonel James Barrett, issues a firm command.
March upon the bridge, but do not fire unless first fired upon.
The militia advances on the North Bridge with a control and determination that alarms the British troops. Although no order is given, the British soldier abruptly fires. Others follow his lead. 2 colonists fall dead. Now, a colonial officer, Major John Buttry, shouts an order that many had hoped never to hear.
Fire, fellow soldiers! For God's sake, fire!
2 British regulars are killed instantly. Others stagger away from the bridge. Then, to the amazement of the advancing colonial militia, the British soldiers fall back, turn, and run. Now, both sides seem confused and uncertain of what to do next. The redcoats straggle back to the center of Concord. The militia followed them, but no more shots are fired.
And the town, thank God, was not set on fire.
No, only the townhouse, burning from a bonfire spark.
The British soldiers even helped to douse the flames.
At last, the redcoats reformed their scarlet column and marched out of town, headed back to Boston, along the Bay Road, the very same highway that had brought them in.
I believe they wished the fighting was over.
Even we did not know it had scarcely begun.
The militiamen pursued the departing British column. As they did, new men continued to stream in from surrounding towns, and the colonial militia began to exceed the redcoats in number. Not far from the town center, two roads form a junction called Miriam's Corner. Here, all the terror and tension of the morning's events came bursting forth. And so began a running battle that continued for 16 miles, all the way back to Charlestown. Lieutenant Colonel Smith attempted to protect his main column by deploying small bands of redcoats into the surrounding fields to keep the militiamen at bay. But wherever the colonists could find a good position close to the column, behind a stone wall or in a stand of trees, they fired. At one shot in a concealing bend in the road, the militiamen staged a particularly bloody ambush.
We were totally surrounded by such an incessant fire as it is impossible to conceive.
In that one spot, British soldiers lost their lives. A moment later, the redcoats passed by this tavern and Mary Hopwell's home once more.
I saw them coming back in the afternoon, all in confusion, wild with rage and loud with threats. Some of the rough, angry soldiers rushed up to this house and fired in. But fortunately, the shots went into the garret, and we were safe.
The regulars approached Lexington in a greatly altered condition than when they had marched out so smartly some 8 hours earlier. They were desperate men now, disorganized and nearly spent with exhaustion and thirst. Just outside the town, their condition worsened still. There, they encountered Captain Parker for the second time that day, positioned on a hill with a small band of his Lexington militia, eager to gain revenge for the morning's killings. With a fearsome volley, Parker's men surprised the oncoming redcoats. As the battle raged over Fisk Hill, just beyond, Lieutenant Colonel Smith was wounded in the fight, and Major Pitcairn thrown from his horse. With both senior officers down, the redcoats seemed to lose all discipline and began to run. One lone British soldier, I'm told, ran straight into a militiaman at the well at Fisk Farm.
You are a dead man! And so are you!
The redcoats came dashing pell-mell into Lexington, fearing, I am sure, that this day would be their last. But there they beheld what to them must have been a blessed sight. 1,000 of their fellow redcoats in an orderly, well-armed relief column, with Earl Percy boldly in the vanguard. When Percy saw Smith's men all bloodied and out of control, and the colonial militiamen in angry pursuit, he took quick and decisive action, firing the cannon he had hauled out from Boston.
I had the happiness of saving from inevitable destruction.
Percy restored discipline and reformed his troops. But by the time the column of 1,700 redcoats marched out of Lexington, the force of militiamen had swelled to some 4,000 men. Now, the colonists had the advantage, and the outnumbered British regulars still had 8 miles to march before they reached the safety of Boston. By all accounts, the fighting along that battle road was uglier and more ferocious than any of the earlier encounters that day. It became a storm of violent skirmishes and bloody showdowns that tore through the towns of Minuteman, Cambridge, and Charlestown, careened into dooryards and private dwellings, and left the streets littered with regulars and militiamen. dead or dying or brutalized. The great majority of casualties occurred not on Lexington Common, nor at the North Bridge in Concord, but along that bloody battle road. All told, 273 British soldiers were killed or wounded that day. There were 95 casualties among the colonists. The regulars did not reach Charlestown and the protecting cover of the guns of the warship Somerset until dusk. A crowd of spectators watched from Boston as the sun set on that extraordinary day. A Boston merchant observed,
I stood upon the hills in town and saw the engagement very plain. It was very bloody. When I reflect and consider that the fight was between those whose parents but a few generations were brothers, I shudder at the thought. There's no knowing where the calamities will end.
none of us can predict what the future may hold. All bloodshed, I fear.
One thing is certain. Nothing will ever be the same as it was before the 19th of April.
We must hope and pray that the fighting will achieve its end, liberty.
I raise my glass to the men who shared that hope.
To the men who fought and died that day.
And to those of us who may be called to do the same tomorrow. Hear, hear. Good night. And may God bless us all.